Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karunam Gana Ganatvam Samsaradava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karuna Gana Ganatvam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Praptasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam 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 Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasurasena Romanchakam pasru taranga bhajo Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shri Vigrahara Tana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramarjanado Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyonjatopi Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satvana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satvana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Kridvaiva Triptin Bhajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shri Radhikama Dabayarapara Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamna Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamna Pratikshana Sa Dhanalalupasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Ne kunjayuno ratikeli siddhai Jajali virjuktir apekshaniya Tatrati daksha atibalabhasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam. Sakshadharitena Shamasta Shastre Ruktastatthava Vyataiva Sarve. Kintu praborja priya eva tasya vande gurashi charanaravrindam. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado. Yasya prasadam nagati kutapi. Yasya prasadam Yasya prasadam nagati kutapi. Dayam stuvam tasya yasatrin sandhyam vande gurashi charanaravrindam. Dayam stuvam tasya yasatrin sandhyam vande gurashi charanaravrindam. Vande gurashi. Nama om Vishnu padaya Krishna prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta. Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachatari Shatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama Jadavaya Madhavaya Gopal Govindaram Srimadhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Shri Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhava, Radhe Radhe. Jayo Jagannath, Baladeva, Jayo Subhadrama, Jayo Sudarshan Chakra. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gor Haribo, 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 Nitai Gor, Primanandi Haribo. Jai Vishwapara Paramahansa Prabhajaka Suttara Saraswati Maharaj. His Divine Grace, Abhachar Vinna Bhakti Viranta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki. ISKCON प्रतिष्ठा विधि संस्थापक आचार्य वैष्णव शिरोमणि पतित पावन श्रील प्रभुपाद जी महाराज की जय। श्री गौर्य गुरु वर्गापति उद्धार की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भद्र गुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास गुण सदगोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय। जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिनंदन सुमन गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावरनाय अवतार की जय। गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरिनाम संकीर्तन जगह की जय। जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। बृहद मृदंग ट्रांसेंडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप कुंदा राधा कुंद श्याम कुंद गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री ब्रज भूमि वृंदावन मथुरधाम की जय। तेलो शिव श्री श्री नील माधव की जय। श्री माया पूर्णवती एक चक्रधाम की जय। परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय। श्री पुरुषोत्तम चित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु स्मृति सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय। गंगा में जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री मथुराधारानी की जय। समवेत भक्त बिंद की जय। निताय गौर हरि परमानंदे हरि बोल। All glories to the Assembly Devotees, all glories to the Assembly Devotees, all glories to the Assembly Devotees, all glories, Shri Gaur.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Prahlada Daine.
Prahlada Daine.
Hiranyakashipu Vakshaha.
Hiranyakashipu Vakshaha.
Ito Simha. Okay na.
Silatangka
Nakanahay.
Jaya Silatangka Nakanahay.
Ito na Simha. Parato na Simha.
Ito ni Simha. Parato ni Simha.
Yato yami tato na Simha.
Jaya Jato 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 ni Simha.
Bahir na Simha, Hidayeh na Simha.
Bahir ni Simha, Hidayeh ni Simha. Narasimha
Madi Sharanama Prade.
Narasimha Madim Sharana Prapade.
Tava Kara Kamala Bari Nakam Abuddha Shinga Dalita Hiranyakashipu Kanabringa Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
तव कर कमल बरे नाकम अद्भुत सिंहा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभिंगा केशवदीप नरविरूप जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे
केशवदीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
जय केशवदूत नरहरिरूप जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे
जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव
जय निसिंहदेव जय निसिंहदेव जय निसिंहदेव जय निसिंहदेव
जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय श्री भक्ति प्रदर्शन विघ्नाशन कनिष्ठ हरि भगवान की जय जय भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की जय निताय गौर हरि प्रमानंदे हरि बोल। श्री वृंदाई तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारे देवी शतवताय नमो नमः। वृंदाई तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारे देवी शतवताय नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारे देवी शतवताय नमो नमः। श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण Priyasi Nama Nama.
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Avilasi.
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Avilasi.
जितो मारा शरण लो तारा वंच पूरन हो
Chito Mara Sharanala Taravancha Purna.
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन बासी
Tumi kripa kari kara tare Vrindavana vasi.
मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास
Morae Vilasa Kunja Diyava.
नायाने हरिवो सदा जुगल रूपरासी
Aminaya Neribo Sada Jugala Ruparasi.
एई निवेदाना धारो साखीर अनुगाता कोरो
Nivedana Sakiriano Gatakara.
सेवा अधिकारा दिए कोरो निज दासी
Sevayare Kadiye Karani Jadasi.
दीना कृष्णा दासे कोए जीना मोरा होए
Jina Krishna Dase Ka Eye Namora.
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जीना भासी
Shri Radha Govinda Prime Sadaye Navasi.
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जीना भासी
Shri Radha Govinda Prime Sadaye Navasi.
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Yani Kani Sapapani Brahma Hatyade Kanisa. Tani tani prana santi pradakshina pare pare.
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्म हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Yani kani sapapani brahma hatyadikani sa. Tani tani prana santi pradakshina pare pare.
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्म हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Yani kani sapapani brahma hatyadikani sa. Tani tani prana santi pradakshina pare pare.
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai.
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devi Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devi Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavadhyamsas of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise, may I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govind. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishtakam ki jai. Chito Dapana Madhani Shri Akari Chandika Vitaranam Vidya Bharudivanam Anandam Buddhamadhanam Padiparam Punam Tashadanam Savatmasam Param Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Nam Kariyodha Sarvashaktis Tatra Pitani Amitasmani Makala Tadushi Tavavipakuvanti Durdhai कृपया तव पाद पंकज तदुरी सदृशं नयनं गौर सुधारे पादनाथ हरिगदर्दया पुलकवञ्चितं बभूकदा तव नाम गहने भविष्यति युगायितं निमिषेण चक्षुषा प्रविशयितं शून्यायितं जगत् सर्वं गोविन्द विरहीन मे आश्लिषवापदरतं विनष्टु माम् अदर्शनात् मर्मातं करोतु वा जता तथा वा विदधातु लम्पट मत्प्राणतस्तु सैव नापरः हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु हस्तकाम की जय नमो महावरणाय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested your transcendental energies. There is not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower on stony street, one should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer our respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet some or other I'm falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And will the hairs of my body stand on end the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm considering one minute to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he should remain so, even if sandals him roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Jai Shri 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 Krishna Kam Ki. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1.
To blaspheme the devotees,
dedicate
dedicate
their
lives
lives
to
for
the
poor
beginning
beginners
of
of
the
the name of the Lord. 2.
Consider names of demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent names of Lord Vishnu.
3.
To disobey the orders of the spiritual master.
4.
To blaspheme the Vedic literature, or to chant pursuant to the Vedic version.
5.
To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna as imagination.
6.
To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord.
7.
To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy names of the Lord.
8.
Consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which often
invades us fruit of activity, karma, kanda. 9.
To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name.
And
10.
to not have complete faith in chanting
the holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions
of this matter. It also an offense to be in a tent while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against his 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vancha
Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janma Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskati Desitarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today we're going to read Canto 2, Chapter 9, text number 3. Yarhi Vava Mahimnani Swe Yarhi Vava Mahimni Swe Parasmin Kala Mayayo Rameta Gata Sammohas Tyakt Vodaste Tadobayam. Yarhi, at any time. Vava, certainly. Mahimni, in the glory. Sve, of himself. Parasmin, in the supreme. Kala, time. Maya yo, of the material energy. Ramita, enjoys. Gata sammoha, being freed from the misconception. Tyaktva, giving up. Udaste, in fullness. Tada, then. Ubayam, both. The misconceptions of I and mine. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. As soon as the living entity becomes situated in its constitutional glory and begins to enjoy the transcendence beyond time and material energy, he at once gives up the two misconceptions of life, I and mine, and thus becomes fully manifested as the pure self. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The two misconceptions of life, namely I and mine, are verily manifested in two classes of men. In the lower state, the conception of mine is very prominent, and in the higher state, the misconception of I is prominent. In the animal state of life, the misconception of mine is perceivable even in the category of cats and dogs who fight with one another with the same misconception of mine. In the lower stage of human life, the same misconception is also prominent in the shape of it is my body, it is my house, it is my family, it is my caste, it is my nation, it is my country, and so on. And in the higher stage of speculative knowledge, the same misconception of mine is transformed into I am. It is all I am, etc. There are many classes of men comprehending the same misconception of I and mine in different colors. But the real significance of I can be realized only when one is situated in the consciousness of I am the eternal servitor of the Lord. This is pure consciousness, and the whole Vedic literatures teach us this conception of life. The misconception of I am the Lord or I am the Supreme is more dangerous than the misconception of mine. Although there are sometimes directions in the Vedic literatures to think oneself one with the Lord, that does not mean that one becomes identical with the Lord in every respect. Undoubtedly, there is oneness of the living entity with the Lord in many respects, but ultimately the living entity is subordinate to the Lord, and he is constitutionally meant for satisfying the senses of the Lord. The Lord therefore asked the conditioned souls to surrender unto him. Had the living entities not been subordinate to the supreme will, why would the living entity be asked to surrender? Had the living being been equal in all respects, then why was he put under the influence of Maya? We have already discussed many times that the material energy is controlled by the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita 9.10 confirms this controlling power of the Lord over the material energy. Can a living entity, who claims to be as good as the Supreme Being, control the material nature? The foolish... The foolish I would reply that he will do so in the future, even accepting that in the future one would be as good a controller of material nature as the Supreme Being. Then why is one now under the control of material nature? The Bhagavad Gita says that one can be freed from the control of the material nature by surrendering unto the Supreme Lord. But if there is no surrender, then the living entity will never be able to control the material nature. So, one must give up this misconception of I by practicing the way of devotional service or firmly being situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. A poor man without any employment or occupation may undergo so many troubles in life, but if, by chance, the same man gets a good service under the government, he at once becomes happy. There is no profit in denying the supremacy of the Lord, who is the controller of all energies, but one should be constitutionally situated in one's own glory, namely to be situated in the pure consciousness of being the eternal servitor of the Lord. In his conditional life, the living entity is servant of the illusory Maya, and in his liberated state, he is the pure, unqualified servant of the Lord. To become untinged by the modes of material nature is the qualification for entering into the service of the Lord. As long as one is a servant of mental concoctions, one cannot be completely free from the disease of I and mine. The Supreme Truth is uncontaminated by the illusory energy because he, meaning Krishna, is the controller of that energy. The relative truths are apt to be engrossed in illusory energy. The best purpose is served, however, when one is directly facing the Supreme Truth, as when one faces the sun. The sun overhead in the sky is full of light, but when the sun is not in the visible sky, all is darkness. Similarly, when one is face to face with the Supreme Lord, he is freed from all illusions, and one who is not so is in the darkness of illusory Maya. The Bhagavad Gita 14.26 confirms this as follows: Mam chayo vibicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityayata brahmabhuyaya kalpate. So the science of bhakti, of worshipping the Lord, glorifying the Lord, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam from the right sources, not from the professional man, but from a person who is Bhagavatam in life, and being always in the association of pure devotees, should be adopted in earnestness. One should not be misled by misconceptions of I and mine. The karmis are fond of the conception of mine, and the jnanis are fond of the conception of I, and both of them are unqualified to be free from the bondage of the illusory energy. Srimad Bhagavatam and primarily the Bhagavad Gita are both meant for delivering a person from the misconception of I and mine. And Srila Vyasadeva transcribed them for the deliverance of the fallen souls. The living entity has to be situated in the transcendental position where there is no more influence of time nor of the material energy. In conditioned life, the living entity is subjected to the influence of time in the dream of past, present, and future. The mental speculator tries to conquer the influence of time by future speculations of becoming Vasudeva, or the Supreme Lord himself, by means of culturing knowledge and conquering over ego. But the process is not perfect. The perfect process is to accept Lord Vasudeva as the supreme in everything, and the best perfection in culturing knowledge is to surrender unto him, because he is the source of everything. Only in that conception can one get rid of the misconception of I and mine. Both Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam confirm it. Srila Vyasadeva has specifically contributed to the illusioned living entities, the science of God, and the process of bhakti yoga in his great literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the conditioned soul should fully take advantage of this great science. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this is a very profound purport. Very, very profound. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, verse number 3. As soon as the living entity becomes situated in its constitutional glory and begins to enjoy the transcendence beyond time and material energy, he at once gives up the two misconceptions of life, I and mine, and thus becomes fully manifested as the pure self. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Guru Premanandi Haribol. So, this one purport, if one understands it, is enough to take someone back to Godhead in this lifetime. It is extremely profound. Why? Because it explains the root problem why we're entangled in the cycle of birth and death, old age, disease, karma, time, and modes of material nature, and all kinds of suffering due to this body, other bodies, etc., and always having under the control of lust, anger, greed, illusion, envy, and madness, crazy behavior. So it explains the why and how we got into this problem, and explains the two fundamental misconceptions that keep us in this situation, and it explains how to get out of it. This is real literature. This is real transcendental literature, because it pinpoints the cause of our dilemma. It explains the process, how to get out of it, and explains the ultimate goal of life. So, if we take Srimad Bhagavatam seriously, even if we only understand one verse and the purport, like this one, it's enough to liberate us from the cycle of birth and death. So we can see all the books that are written, how to do this, how to do, do-it-yourself books, and history books, and so many different types of books. None of them are explaining this. None of them. Bible to a little bit, and Quran to a little bit. Yes, there's some pointing to ultimate goal of life, definitely, but not with this exacting detail. That's the difference between these other spiritual scriptures. Although they point to the same goal, but they don't explain so clearly what the pitfalls are. But here Bhagavatam does it. Now, the problem is this. People are not interested in the subject. They're so overwhelmed with I and mine misconceptions that they're like insulated. They have a blockage in their mentality, and they refuse to accept this. Even if they hear it, even if it's explained to them, they still do not want to take it seriously. Why? Because people are promising, by 2050 we'll solve the problem of death. So you just have to stay alive until then, that's all. And to do that, take a lot of supplements and, just somehow or other stay alive, because by 2050 you'll be free of death. I mean, this is all nonsense. It's not true. These are just false promises. And just like Elon Musk is promising, well, we'll be going to Mars pretty soon. You can. I remember in 1968 and 69, after the so-called the moon landing happened, real estate agents in New York were already plotting out real estate on the moon and giving people a chance to buy it and put down payments on it. And Pan Am Airlines, which doesn't exist anymore, they were guaranteeing trips to the moon by 1975. So this is 1968, right? 1975, they were saying, we'll be regularly flying to the moon also. You can bet your boots that's going to happen. This is all nonsense, right? Now, go back, look up, in the newspapers at that time, 1968, 69, and you'll see this type of crazy statements were being made on the basis that they landed on the moon, and very soon we would be going to the moon like we go to, from Mumbai to Seattle. You'll be able to fly to the moon. So, and people love to hear this type of nonsense and believe it. See? So there are many things people like to hear and believe that are completely false. But, and then when we speak Bhagavad Gita, they're not interested in it. They don't take it seriously. They say, yeah, this is the truth, and then they go back and do nonsense again. And they're always, overwhelmed by Maya. So, to look more carefully into this purport. First of all, the verse itself says everything. It says, as soon as the living entity becomes situated in its constitutional glory. Now, let's look up that word constitutional, because it has many meanings. C-O-N-S-T-I. Right? Constitutional. S-T-I-T-U-T-I-O-N-A-L. Let's look that word up, because it has many meanings. But we want to nail the right meaning of this use in this context. It means that you're hardwired to be Krishna's eternal servant, basically. That's our constitutional position. And it not only says position, in many places it says condition, but here it says constitutional glory, because a person becomes glorious when they accept that my real identity is the eternal servant of Krishna, and they actually engage in that service. So what does it say? Constitutional.
It says constitutional, relating to or established a set of principles governing a state. That's one meaning. But other meaning is relating to inherent in or affecting the constitutional of body or mind, of relating to or entering into the fundamental makeup of something essential, being in accordance with or authorized by the constitutional state or society or constitutional government. There are three choices here.
Yeah, so when you say constitution, it's the makeup of a person. It's who the person is. Let's put it like that. Who am I? Am I this body, or am I an eternal soul? So when the constitutional glory, as Prabhupada uses this phrase, constitutional glory, means you come to the conclusion that I am not this body. I am the eternal servant of Krishna. I have an eternal soul that has nothing to do with this body, and I am not going to get caught in the trap of fruitive work anymore. I'm going to only engage in devotional service, offer the result to Krishna, be satisfied with whatever I get back. And if I don't get anything back, that's okay also, because as we say, astishyava padaratam pinastamam adarshanam marmahatu karutava yata tata vavidatu lampato mat prananatas to saiva napara. Oh my Lord, I am your eternal servant, and you can treat me nicely or you can treat me badly. You can ignore me or you can hug me so hard you break my bones. It doesn't matter. That I will always remain your servant regardless of any situation in life. And on top of all that, I'm not asking anything back from you. I don't want liberation, I don't want wealth, I don't want this partner, that partner, I don't want disciples. I simply want your devotional service birth after birth. I don't even want liberation. So that is our real constitutional position. That's who we are. That is our real identity. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there's some very interesting points that are made. Let me just see if I can find it quickly. It says that there is identity and individuality. So, in the 5th chapter, 17th verse, this point is made. Now, what does this mean? You probably have read this. Have you ever read that? In the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says, when one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the Supreme Transcendental Truth is Lord Krishna. The whole Bhagavad Gita centers around the declaration that Krishna is the Supreme Personality Godhead. That is the version of all Vedic literature. Paratattva means the Supreme Reality, who is understood by the knowers of the Supreme as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality Godhead, is the last word in the Absolute. There is nothing more than that. The Lord says, Mata parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya. Impersonal Brahman is also supported by Krishna. Brahmano hi pratistaham. Therefore, in all ways, Krishna is the Supreme Reality, one whose mind, intelligence, faith, and refuge are always in Krishna. Or in other words, one who is fully in Krishna consciousness is undoubtedly washed clean of all misgivings and is in perfect knowledge in everything concerning transcendence. A Krishna conscious person can thoroughly understand that there is duality, simultaneous identity and individuality in Krishna, and equipped with such transcendental knowledge, one can make steady progress in the path of liberation. Do you understand? Does anybody here understand what he means by identity and individuality? Come over here and say. Because in the previous verse, the last sentence says, at night we see everything as one in the darkness, but in day, when the sun is up, we see everything in its real identity. Identity and individuality in spiritual life is real knowledge. So he says it in 5:16, and he says it in 5:17. And he says, a Krishna conscious person can thoroughly understand that there is duality, simultaneous identity and individuality in Krishna. What does this mean?
Yeah, Guru Maharaj. So, the identity and individuality is referring to the fact, as opposed to the Mayavad philosophy, where you become one with the Lord, you still continue your individuality, but your identity is to be part and parcel of the Lord. So when a Krishna conscious person understands that, then he is perfectly situated in that.
Yeah, so we are simultaneously one with the Lord, meaning we're eternal. The Lord is eternal also. Meaning that we have knowledge. The Lord has all knowledge, and we can participate in that. But we'll never be equal, but we have knowledge also by serving the Lord. And then there's bliss. Now, we'll never be equal to Krishna fully in bliss, but because it's always increasing. But we can participate in it. So we are one, but yet we remain an individual. Whereas the Mayavadi said there's just oneness, no individuality. Good, very good, thank you. See, if we have to understand these things, that's why we're having class. That's why we have to go back and reread Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and understand what is being said. Otherwise, you know the words. The word, you understand what it means. It says there is simultaneous identity and individuality. But do you actually know what it means? That's the question. And just a cursory reading of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam does not mean you understand it. And most people forget what they have read. Most people forget the class also. I mean, you can say, oh, were you in the class this morning? Yeah, I was there. How was it? Oh, it's great. Man, he said a lot of important things. What, can you tell me one thing he said? Oh, he said everything about Krishna. He was talking about Krishna the whole time. Well, can you mention one thing he said about Krishna? Well, he said Krishna is Supreme Personality Godhead. Anything else? Well, there was a lot of good, wonderful points. Really wonderful points. Well, can you explain the class? Well, I can't remember everything, but it was wonderful. So you see, how much did? Well, you can say, well, he understood the main thing. Krishna is Supreme Personality Godhead. So that's good. It's not bad. But most people don't really remember even the class. They might sometimes remember one or two things. But later on, they forget. It's not that they remember the rest of their life. Most of the things are forgotten, unless it's some life-changing realization. Now, sometimes that happens. Like one time, when I just joined the movement, and it was nighttime. We had been out till around almost 10 o'clock at night, going door to door preaching. This was in London. And we came back, and the last thing we did at night was to drink hot milk with bananas in it, in the milk. And I always look forward to this because, you have the taste of the banana, and it's somewhat sweet, and the milk is warm. And it was a cold night. We were out till almost 10 o'clock. So, and they had a tape of Prabhupada playing, And I wasn't really paying too much attention to the tape, but I was hearing it, but I wasn't really focused on it. But Prabhupada said one thing that shocked me, and he said, and he didn't say it real loud. He said, and if for any reason you cannot take the Krishna consciousness in this lifetime, then that will indicate that you have been cursed. I heard that, and I said, what did he just say? I asked someone, what did he just say? And he said, no, I wasn't listening, And, I thought I heard that you'll be cursed by Yamaraj. That means you're cursed by Yamaraj if for some reason you can't take the Krishna. Now, I've never forgotten it. That's like almost 50 years ago. But that stayed in my mind this whole time. And I actually have seen that statement in different places. So, sometimes there's a life-changing, realization by hearing. But most of the stuff we hear goes in one ear and comes out the other ear. You see? And it doesn't really stick in the mind. So therefore, repetition is extremely important in spiritual life. And you can see, even the Bhagavatam, it's repeating a lot of things. But every time it repeats something later on in the Bhagavatam, there's more information. So I'll give an example of that. If we go back to the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, and we go to page... Yeah, okay, so we go back to page 7, 8, 9. 1 second. Let me see where this is. Okay. In page number 13, I think, yeah. Okay, we go back to page number, yeah. So in the page number 10, it says, the position of Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, is that of supreme consciousness. The jivas, or the living entities, being parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also conscious. Both the living entity and the material nature is explained as Prakriti, the energy of the Supreme Lord. But one of the two, the jiva, is conscious. The other, Prakriti, is not conscious. That is the difference. Therefore, the jiva, Prakriti, is called superior, because jiva has consciousness which is similar to the Lord's. The Lord is supreme consciousness, however, and one should not claim that the jiva, the living entity, is also supremely conscious. The living being cannot be supremely conscious at any stage of his perfection, and the theory that he can be so is a misleading theory. Conscious he may be, but he is not perfectly or supremely conscious. So this is an example of identity and individuality. First of all, Prabhupada differentiates in this one little paragraph the difference between Prakriti, the material nature, and the jiva, because he says Prakriti is not conscious. Now someone said, well, that's not true, because I'm conscious and my body is made of Prakriti. Yeah, but it's only because the soul is present. When the soul leaves the body, there's no consciousness. And before those elements in the body, material elements in the body, before one was born, they were existing in nature, but they were not conscious. It's only when the soul enters the body that one becomes conscious. So Prabhupada first differentiates between consciousness and the consciousness of a living entity and matter. Matter itself is not conscious. So I can tell you right now. So here's Vidya Sagar Prabhu like that. So if I go crazy and I grab this microphone, I say, I'm going to hit you over the head, Prabhu, and you say, no, you're not, and you put your hands up trying to protect yourself. But if I try and hit the wall with the microphone, the wall doesn't say anything. Why? Because it's not conscious, right? So that proves that matter is not conscious, but the living entity is, even though he has a material body, but the body itself, made of matter, is not conscious. It's only because the soul is present in the body that there's consciousness. And when the soul leaves the body, it's not conscious anymore. So Prabhupada first differentiates between the consciousness of a living entity and matter. And then he says, and this is the amazing statement, he says, the Lord is supreme consciousness. No, he says before that. He said, but the living entity and the material nature are explained as Prakriti, the energy of the Supreme Lord. But one of the two, the jiva, is conscious. The other, Prakriti, is not conscious. So both living entities like you and me, and matter are prakriti. What does prakriti mean? What is controlled by the Supreme Lord? What is subordinate to the Supreme Lord? So we're both prakriti. But we're different than matter because we have consciousness and matter doesn't have consciousness. So then he says, that is the difference between the jiva and prakriti, or the jiva, the living entity, and the material nature. Therefore, the jiva prakriti is called superior because the jiva has consciousness which is similar to the Lord. So there is prakriti, or material nature, and there's jiva prakriti, the living entity, who has a soul but is covered by the material matter, by matter, right? The Lord's is supremely consciousness, however, and one should not claim that the jiva, the living entity, is also supremely conscious. The living being cannot be supremely conscious at any stage of his perfection, and the theory that he can be so is a misleading theory. Conscious he may be, but he is not perfectly or supremely conscious. So this means that we are subordinate to the Lord. Although we have a similar quality as the Lord, we are conscious, but he's supremely conscious and we are subordinate. We're never equal to him in anything, but we can share certain qualities. Matter is not conscious, so doesn't share consciousness with the Lord, but the jiva prakriti, the living entity in condition in the material world, does share something similar with the Lord. The Lord is conscious, we are conscious, but he is supremely conscious, we are subordinate consciousness. So that's an explanation of identity and individuality. And the Mayavadis, they are the first proponents of cancel culture, so they cancel this idea that the Lord is superior and the jiva is never equal to him. And they say, at one point, Atma becomes Paramatma. All the Mayavadis say this. At one point, the Atma, the individual jiva, will become Paramatma. It's just have to just do some meditation and a little bit of tapasya and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You can even smoke some marijuana and you become God. So then Prabhupada continues, and this is right in the introduction, page 10 and 11. He says that this, by the way, the introduction Prabhupada has written is one of the most amazing pieces of literature that has ever been written. And it's short, but everything is explained. If you understand just the introduction, you understand the whole Bhagavad Gita. Then he says, the distinction between the jiva and the Ishvara, meaning between the individual living entity like you and me and God, will be explained in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The Lord is Kshetrajna, conscious, as is the living being, but the living being is conscious of his particular body, whereas the Lord is conscious of all bodies. Because he lives in the heart of every living being, he is conscious of the psychic movements of the particular jivas. We should not forget this. In other words, and everybody forgets this, Krishna knows everything we do, everything we think or desire. He knows everything about us. He knows us better than we know us. So that's why there's no question of privacy anywhere in existence. There's always a witness. That's Krishna. And the demigods. And the insects and the birds and the ants, they're always witnessing what we're doing. But Krishna is the supreme witness of what we're doing, what we're thinking, what are our desires, and so forth. So when you actually realize this, you realize, well, wait a minute, there's no place where I have privacy. And there's no question of a secret. The Lord is not only in our heart, but he is fully conscious of everything we think, everything we desire, everything we do. So there's no way of getting out of it. See, It's just like, people say, well, Big Brother is there through the internet now, right? Because, now Facebook is peeping on you all the time. They know, and because of that, they share this knowledge with different companies. So you were desiring to take a vacation to Cancun, Mexico, and you looked it up a little bit on the internet. So the next time you do a search for something, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there comes an advertisement for how much the ticket costs to go to Cancun. What? How did that get there? You were looking up something else, a Prabhupada lecture, and in the middle of the Prabhupada lecture, something comes up. You can go to Cancun for only $39, but you have to buy the ticket from Expedia at this time, or this, How did that get there? Well, that was Facebook or Twitter or one of those companies that sold their information about you. Is this true or not? Yeah, you see. So there's always going to be a witness. But the ultimate witness is Krishna. So it's impossible to have any privacy. And when you realize this, you become Krishna conscious, because you can't get away with anything. See? What does a thief do? All of a sudden, the thieves, they come out, they wear a black mask, they wear a black hoodie, and they break a window and go in and grab stuff and run away, and you can't really tell who they are because they're completely dressed in black. They have a black mask on and a black hoodie, and it's hard to identify who they are. And they know where the cameras are, so they always try and keep their back to the camera. So and they think they can get away with it, but Krishna knows exactly who they are. You see, so it's impossible to get away with anything. So here it says, because he lives in the heart of every living being, he is conscious of the psychic movements of the particular jivas. We should not forget this. You see, Prabhupada said, we should not forget this, because we might come under the illusion that we can get away with things. We can't get away with anything. It is also explained that the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is living in everyone's heart as Ishvara, as the controller, and that he is giving directions for the living entity to act as he desires, not as Krishna desires, as the living entity desires, right? So that it's a small h. Whenever there's a capital H, it's referring to Krishna. Whenever there's a small h, it's referring to you and me. So Krishna is the Ishvara, as the controller, and that he is, so if it said he's the supreme Ishvara, it would be capitalized. But he's using the word Ishvara with a small I, so it's a generic, has a generic meaning of controller. But if it says supreme controller, the words would be the beginning of those words would be capitalized. So it says, he is living in everyone's heart as Ishvara, as the controller, and that he is giving directions for the living entity to act as he desires. So when we desire, like I might be thinking, oh, it'd be nice if I could go to Cancun, Mexico, and get a little break. I'm getting tired of hearing all these lectures and getting up early. I can go down there and take a break, right? So all of a sudden, it says here, and he is giving directions for the living entity to act as he desires. So Krishna is going to help you achieve your nonsense desire, because you're desiring it, right? Therefore it says, and there's another important phrase, that man proposes, God disposes. Now what does that mean? That's in the 5th chapter and 15th verse. What does that mean? Man proposes, God disposes. It rhymes also. You could do a rap song like that. Man proposes, God disposes. What does it mean? Come on. Anybody?
We desire until the desire.
What?
We desire Krishna makes it happen.
Yeah.
He's the real controller.
So you have to be careful what you desire. There was one time a man who he was in the desert, and he came to an oasis. So sometimes in the most isolated desert, you might find an oasis. That means it's some water comes up, and in a very small area there are palm trees, and there's some water in the middle of a desert. Right? So he found it. He was almost dead, but he found this desert, and he was able to save his life. And he drank some water, and he had some shade from palm trees. But he was very hungry. He hadn't eaten anything for a long time. Now, he didn't understand that oasis, that's very small oasis, there were only maybe 10, 15 trees there, but it was a magical place. And those were not ordinary trees. They were desire trees. So he's sitting under the tree now. He's quenched his thirst, so he's somewhat relieved from all his suffering, but he's still suffering because he's very hungry. And he was thinking, oh, it'd be so nice if I could have some nice pakoras and chutney. All of a sudden, his eyes were closed when he was saying this, and he was saying it, with deep emotion, And when he opened his eyes, he saw a little table there, and there were freshly cooked warm pakoras and chutney. And he couldn't believe it. He was like rubbing his eyes and looking at it. And then he touched it, and it was real. So he grabbed one pakora, dipped it in chutney, and started eating it. It was nectar, And he ate the whole thing real quickly, And he went back, and closed his eyes, and he was thinking, something strange about this place, I'm not even sure if this was a dream or real, but I tasted it, and it really was good. He opened his eyes again. The table was still there, but, the plate was empty now. So he went back like this, closed his eyes, and said, it'd be so nice if there was some cold Beaujolais wine. Then he opened his eyes. The wine bottle was there. A glass was there. And he poured some into it, and he drank it. It was cool, and it's quenching his thirst, and he gave him a little bit of a buzz, and he was like amazed. He said, he's looking at the tree, he's looking around. There's something special about this place, And then he said, and it would be wonderful if there was a beautiful lady here. He opens his eyes. There's a beautiful lady, and she's smiling at him. And he said, hello. And she said, hi. And he was like amazed, and he said, this is unbelievable, and then he closed his eyes right away, and he said, and now I want some gold. I want gold. He opens his eyes, and no, he didn't say I want gold. He said, I want the power that anything I touch turns into gold. He opens his eyes, he's looking around, and he touches one of the cups, the glass, of wine, and it turned to gold. He said, oh my God, So he said, I want some more wine, and more wine comes, and he tells the girl, you pour some, and she pours some into another glass, and he said he got so overwhelmed with lust, that he grabs the hand of the girl, right? And tries to pull her over. And as soon as he touches her, she turns into gold. And she becomes like hard, And then he tries to grab the wine glass, right? And drink the wine. It turns into gold. Eventually he died because everything he touched turned to gold. You see? So you have to be very careful what we desire. Because Krishna, if you keep insisting on sense gratification, Krishna will help you to get it. And you become trapped in a horrible cycle of birth and death that way. So everything is going to depend on our desires, what's going on up here. If we can't control what's going on up here, we're always going to be a prisoner. And how do you control the mind? There's only one way. Only one way. There are not 5 different ways. You have to hear Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita every day. And it's spoken by genuine devotees. And you have to read it on your own also. and hear it and discuss it and keep going over and over on it until it becomes so much part of you that everything else has no significance. It's only Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and devotional service. Then you become liberated from the cycle of birth and death at that point. And it's not liberated after you die. You're liberated now, because nothing can take your mind away from Krishna. So therefore it says here that he is conscious of the psychic movements of the particular jivas. We should not forget this. It is also explained that the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is living in everyone's heart as Ishvara, as the controller, and that he is giving directions for the living entity to act as he desires. The living entity forgets what to do. First of all, he makes a determination in a certain way, and then he is entangled in the actions and reactions of his own karma. Now let me read that again, because this is a very significant statement. He says, we should not forget this. What is that? That Krishna lives in the heart of every living being. He is conscious of the psychic movements of every particular living entity. We should not forget this. It is also explained that the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is living in everyone's heart as Ishvara, the controller, and that he is giving directions for the living entity to act as he desires. The living entity forgets what to do. First of all, he makes a determination to act in a certain way, and then he is entangled in the actions and reactions of his own karma. After giving up one type of body, he enters another type of body, as we put on and take off clothes. As the soul thus migrates, he suffers the actions and reactions of his past activities. These activities can be changed when the living being is in the mode of goodness, in sanity, it's not insanity, one word, it's two words, in sanity. So when it's in sanity like this, it means not that you're crazy, but you're acting in a sane way, right? You see how easy. Now if you just read this quickly, or if you hear someone reading it quickly, you would say, he said insanity, crazy. But no, it says insanity, meaning in a state of saneness, right? So he said these activities are selfish activities for sense gratification, can be changed when a living being is in the mode of goodness, in sanity, in a state of saneness, not craziness, and understands what sort of activities he should adopt. If he does so, then all the actions and reactions of his past activities can be changed. Consequently, karma is not eternal. That's a big point. If karma was eternal, like time, like the living being, like the material nature, like Krishna, like time, then if karma was eternal, like those four things, then there would be no possibility for us to become Krishna conscious. But karma is not eternal, therefore it can be changed. You can't change time, you can't change your soul, you can't change Krishna, you can't change the material nature, but you can change karma. That is the one loophole. And if you understand this, then you can see that the decision to give up sense gratification and to take up Krishna consciousness means that you can stop your karma completely. Right? And there are verses like that. I quoted them yesterday. Kurvani vahakarmani jajiva chekchatam samha evam tvayi nanyatetus nakarma lipyatenare. Second verse of Isha Upanishad. One who acts, as explained in the first verse, you only accept your bare minimum needs and everything else you use in the service of Krishna, then you're never affected by karma in this lifetime. Never affected. You can go on living hundreds, thousands, millions of years, you'll never be affected by karma because you only accept your bare minimum and you use everything else in Krishna's service. Okay, so therefore, consequently, karma is not eternal. Therefore, we stated that of the 5 items, Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, time, and karma. 4 are eternal, whereas karma is not eternal. That these are huge points. If we understand these things, then we see the absolute necessity why we should become Krishna conscious. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? This is the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, but did you realize how profound it is? These are huge points that Prabhupada is making, right?
Actually, if we read introduction after reading other verses,
Yeah,
there's another level
it makes more sense. Yeah.
Maybe after 5 years, if we read, you feel some more 5, 10, like that. I think every time we read, we understand something.
If you read it in the company of advanced devotees, if you don't have that company, you don't have a chance to ask questions. And therefore, you could read it 1,000 times and still not understand it. Right? You have to read it in the company of advanced devotees. Then you can ask questions. You can have discussion. You can repeat it under the guidance of more advanced devotees, and they can point things out to you that although you thought you understood it, you passed the test. You passed the what do you call that? Bhakti Shastri class, right? You had to read Bhagavad Gita, you had to read this thing, and you passed the test. That doesn't mean you understand anything. Well, the fact that you continue in unalloyed devotional service, that's a proof that you did understand. But it doesn't mean that you're an expert preacher, though. The expert preacher understands all these fine points and can explain them to others. So people have questions, and if you're able to explain it correctly, as Prabhupada is explaining here, then you're an expert preacher. And if you're not, then you're not going to have any positive results preaching to other people. You're not going to be able to convince them to become Krishna conscious because you have not actually understood in depth what is being said here. Right? So it's very important to be trained in Krishna consciousness, philosophy, as well as practical service. Right? Yes.
So, in this particular introduction verse, paragraph that you read, there's a difference between Prakriti, the Jiva Prakriti, and
the
the
material
nature.
which
But,
is also Prakriti,
Prakriti. But
which means being controlled by the Supreme Lord.
correct. Yeah. So the one question, or rather more explanation is, but at the same time, let's say in all the Vedic scriptures, every mountain, every river is also considered a personality. So
Anything that grows and diminishes has a soul, like a cloud also has a soul.
So even though for general understanding it may be considered as matter, but there is a personality that is controlling that matter. Is that the understanding there?
Just like you have a certain amount of control over your body.
Hmm.
If you want to jump off a bridge, you can do it. Right? Yeah. Okay, so what do you want to say?
So there also, even though the water itself is matter, but in the form of the river, there is a personality that is controlling that matter. How do we explain the personality behind that matter? And that's not the same as just pure matter.
Okay, I'll give you an example. Haridas Thakur was living in a cave, and people would come to have darshan to that cave. But there happened to be a very big and dangerous poisonous snake in that cave also. And sometimes the snake would show itself, and it would freak out the people. So eventually they said, Haridas, we love you very much. We really cherish hearing you speak and asking questions. But we're not going to come here anymore because we're afraid of that snake. It's a big, big, dangerous snake. We're not as advanced as you are. We're not going to come anymore. And Haridas said, well, I'm very sorry to hear that. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, the snake comes out and slithers out the cave and never comes back again. How did that happen? If you read the explanation of it, And in this Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's that Krishna is in the heart of every living entity, and he ordered the snake to leave, to not inconvenience Haridas Thakur. You see? So Krishna is the supreme controller of everything. No one is independent of him. So he's controlling the clouds, he's controlling the mountain, he's controlling the river. So, and he's present in every atom. So even matter, inert matter, or matter that doesn't have consciousness, has the presence of the soul in it. Right? Now, therefore, in one sense, everything in nature has a soul. You know, Krishna is present everywhere. But, in general, only things that grow and diminish have a soul, an individual soul like you and me. Everything that seems to be static on the macroscopic level, that doesn't grow and diminish, it does not have a dominant individual soul. Okay. So this microphone, I can bang it, I can burn it, I can do whatever, and it doesn't object, right? But something that has a soul would object. Like the other day, I saw a very, very tiny little insect, right, in the page of my book. So I tried to flick it off so it would just go away, right? But it was so tiny. I mean, it was like, that's how big it was. Almost nothing. But yet it was moving, right? And so that little thing has a soul in it, an individual soul, as well as Paramatma. So, and it moves around. But it moved very slowly, but it moves around. And it was living in the book. So whatever is going to be moving, it's going to be growing, it's going to be diminishing, has a soul. So there are different rocks that grow. So then there are other rocks that you don't see them grow at all. So the rocks that grow or diminish, they actually have a soul in it. And the rocks that don't seem to grow or diminish, unless you try and powder them or anything, but on their own they don't grow or diminish. They don't have an individual soul. Paramatma is there, but not an individual soul. That's the way you should look at it. Okay. Okay, so now we had Samartha.
One example of having Paramatma is
What?
the Prahlada Maharaja. That's a very classic example of it, right? So Paramatma is in the pole. Actually, he was asked why. So where is your Paramatma? So Nrsimha come out of the pole, which is material totally, right? So this is an example of that. It's in the pole itself. It's a material energy. But
He was in a
came out of
column.
the
It was
pole.
it's not a pole. It was a column.
Oh, column. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. And so Nrsimhadev asked, not Nrsimhadev, his father, asked him, where is your God? You tell me where your God is. I'm going to kill him. He said, well, he's everywhere. He said, is it in this column here? He had 1,000 columns in his palace. He said, yes. So he smashes the column, and out comes Nrsimhadev. Right? Yeah, so Krishna is present everywhere, right? But therefore, but that goes back to my original point. We don't have any privacy at all. You can have, your bedroom. You can lock the door. You can close all the curtains, turn off the lights. Still Krishna is there, witnessing everything you do. So we can't get away with anything. Okay, so Samartha's here. You're going to read your homework. And Arush is here. Yeah, you can read. No, did you read your homework? Yeah, you did. Okay. Okay, you're going to read. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, just put the microphone down a little bit like this. No, not like that. Just touch the mic. Touch the mic itself. That's it. Yeah, okay.
So the homework was to look up devotees who chose to suffer then protest. So you use Bhagavad Gita 12.13 to 14 and any other references. So A pure devotee is always tolerant and never envious of anyone. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport of Bhagavad Gita 12.13-14, nor does a devotee become his enemy's enemy. He thinks, this person is acting as my enemy due to my own past misdeeds, so it is better to suffer than to protest. A devotee always thinks that it is the Lord's mercy when they are in distress or in difficult times. Here are a couple of examples of pure devotees of the Lord, or the Lord himself, who have demonstrated this characteristic. So first I did Lord Rama. So Lord Ramachandra is a special example of when the Lord himself shows an example of a characteristic that a devotee should have. When Bharata was destined to become the king because of the boon that Kaikeyi asked for, Lord Rama did not protest at all, and he right away accepted the fact and went straight to exile for 14 years. Then the next one I did was Prahlada Maharaj. So when Prahlada Maharaj was just 5 years old, he was a pure devotee of the Lord. When Prahlada Maharaj was still in the womb of his mother, Narada Muni speaks the spiritual science of Krishna consciousness to Prahlada's mother. Prahlada Maharaj never forgot these conversations. As Prahlada Maharaj grew older, he started to become a pure devotee of the Lord. When it was time that he would go to school, Hiranyakashipu sent him to the demoniac school, where they would teach him how to become a demon like Hiranyakashipu, and that Hiranyakashipu was God. After the first day, Hiranyakashipu asked Prahlada Maharaj what he learned. Prahlada Maharaj said he learned that Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This same cycle went on and on for 3 days. Then Hiranyakashipu got very mad at Prahlada Maharaj and wanted to kill him. He tried throwing Prahlada Maharaj off a cliff, putting him in a box of poisonous snakes, and putting him in a room of mad elephants. Instead of protesting, Prahlada Maharaj prayed to the Lord and survived all the attempts of his killing. Then the next example I did was Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was originally a Muslim. When the Muslim ruler found out that Haridas Thakur moved to Vaishnavism, he arrested him. When Haridas Thakur tried to enlighten the Qazi by saying, all living entities in creation are inspired by the Lord and the heart to act in different ways. People of different religions praise the Lord's holy names and qualities according to the view of their scriptures. The Supreme Lord accepts everyone's mood. If anyone shows malice towards another's religion, he actually shows malice to the Lord himself, who is worshipped by that religion. Since God is one, that person becomes envious of the same Supreme Lord that he is himself is worshipping. The governor took these words to heart, but the local ruler gave Haridas Thakur 2 choices, either to come back to Islam or die. Haridas Thakur replied firmly, if my body is hacked to pieces and even if I am killed, still I will keep chanting Hare Krishna. The angered Qazi ordered Haridas Thakur to be publicly whipped to death. He was brutally beaten, dragged through 22 markets, and thrown in the Ganges. As Haridas Thakur was always remembering the Lord Hari, he survived by God's grace. The Qazi, the Brahmanas, and his rivals ran to Haridas Thakur. They then begged Haridas Thakur forgiveness for their offenses. He forgave them and blessed them with devotion for Krishna.
The Qazi didn't go. The guys that were beating him.
Oh.
Yeah. The 2 people that were beating him in the different markets, when they saw he wasn't dying, they begged him, please die, because if we don't kill you, the Qazi is going to kill us. So later on, after he died, the Qazi came to make sure he was dead and kicked him to see if he moved, and he didn't move. So then he said, okay, throw the kafir into the river. And they threw him into the river. I think it was the Ganges. And he went downstream and swam out. And that night he came back,
Knocked on his door.
knocked on the door of the Muslim ruler. And when the Muslim ruler opened the door, he said, oh! He said, you're dead. He said, no, I'm not dead. You know. He said, don't you ever touch the body of a Vaishnava again. He said, no, I never will. Please, don't do anything. He said, if you don't do this, you'll be okay. So he didn't kill him. Right? But then Haridas Thakur was wondering, how come I was beaten so much, but I didn't really feel anything, So he decided to go see Lord Chaitanya. And when he went to have darshan of Lord Chaitanya stood with his back to him, and he was not, he took off his chadar. And Haridas Thakur could see that all the blows that he received, they went to the back of Lord Chaitanya. And he had these big welts on his body. And then he understood how the Lord protected him. Okay, Haribol, thank you. Some more?
Last paragraph. These are 3 examples of pure devotees, or the Lord himself, demonstrating the quality of choosing to suffer than to protest. Lord Ramachandra did not even question his father when he asked him to go to exile. Prahlada Maharaja and Haridas Thakur were under excruciating circumstances, but because they had faith, Shraddha in the Lord, Krishna helped them.
Very good. Haribol. Okay, well, Mr. Charan. And then you next.
Question. Look up examples of devotees who choose to suffer rather than to protest. Explain what is in the mind of a devotee. Answer. In BG 12.13
BG is Bhagavad Gita, of course.
Bhagavad Gita 12.13 to 14, the Lord is describing the transcendental qualities of a pure devotee. A pure devotee is not envious of anyone, but is a kind friend to all living entities, does not think himself as a proprietor, is free from false ego, is equal in both happiness and distress, always tolerant, always satisfied, very self-controlled. A devotee is never disturbed in any circumstances. He also never becomes his enemy's enemy, always engaged in devotional service with determination, with his mind and intelligence fixed on Krishna. Such a devotee is very dear to him. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.8, it is mentioned that whenever a devotee is in distress or has fallen into difficulty, he thinks that it is the Lord's mercy upon him, and he will wait patiently until the Lord delivers him. Some examples of pure devotees who are being tortured but never protested. Haridas Thakur, beaten by the Muslims. The 5 Pandavas. Duryodhana sent them to the forest using unfair means. Vasudeva and Devaki sent to prison and personally saw their children being killed. Nityananda Prabhu in the Jaga and Madai pastime. Prahlada Maharaja got tortured by his father who was trying to even kill him. Lord Ramachandra got sent into the forest by his stepmother.
Very good. Very good.
So the question was, how is the life of a devotee different from the life of a materialistic person? Look up examples of people who decided to suffer rather than protest.
So now, let me just repeat again. These are individuals. If, let's say, somebody comes and starts beating up your little sister, and you say, oh, well, Hari Vilas told me it's better to suffer than protest, so I'll just let that guy beat the heck out of my sister. No, you would have to protest there, and you would have to do something to stop it. But when it's you, then you can follow that principle. Okay.
The mentality of a devotee is pure. It is in the mode of goodness. The devotee has a proper lifestyle. They don't eat meat, they don't intoxicate themselves, they don't gamble, and they don't engage in illicit connections outside of marriage. The lifestyle of a devotee is extremely regulated. They sleep early and wake up early, before sunrise or Brahma Muhurta. They regularly listen to Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita in the morning, spoken by a pure devotee. They only eat food that is offered to the Lord or prasadam. Krishna or the Supreme Lord is centered in a devotee's life. Such a devotee's mentality revolves around Krishna. The devotee constantly ensures that the deeds he or she performs are favorable to Krishna. They will always try to remember the Lord because he or she knows that if one gratifies the senses, then he or she immediately forgets the Lord, and that act of sense gratification will always be followed by suffering. The mentality of a devotee is nothing like the mentality of a materialistic person. Their mentality of the materialistic person's mentality of life in general is driven by anxiety. They are in the mode of passion or ignorance. Their goal is to make a lot of money and enjoy the money that they have made by gratifying their senses. For example, drinking, feasting with meat and other non-sattvic foods, gambling, or even engaging in illicit activities. The mentality of such people will always be very impure. Their lives will be filled with suffering because they engage in sense gratification. This is the case for most of the people in this world. Their lives are filled with sufferings and driven by anxiety. And the sad part is that people won't stop sense gratification. It is almost like they are attached to the suffering. People in this world are under the perception that sense gratification is a form of happiness. But Prabhupada has clearly said that there is no form of happiness in material life. But because of illusion, people think there is. It is always better to suffer than protest. Prabhupada in his morning walk on January 5th, 1974 said that a person who suffers instead of protesting is a first-class man. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th
What
canto...
Can you read that again? What did it say? A person who?
It is always... a person who suffers instead of protesting is a first-class man.
He says that in the actual lecture?
In the morning walk.
The morning walk. And what date was it?
January 5th, 1974.
January 5th, 1974. Better to suffer than to protest?
Yeah, like a man who decides to suffer than protest is considered as a first-class man.
Very good. Good.
In Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.8, it states that a devotee thinks that it is the favor of Krishna and that he has put me into suffering. For them, the suffering is not really suffering. It is the will of the Lord. The Pandavas are a great example of personalities who suffered instead of protesting. Duryodhana plotted to kill the Pandavas countless times, but each time they tolerated it instead of fighting back. They kept tolerating until they came to a point where they had to fight. When someone comes across a
They were
form...
ordered to fight by Krishna.
Oh, okay, sorry. When someone comes across a form of suffering, they should think that it is the Lord's mercy. We should be suffering a lot more, but due to the Lord's mercy, we are only suffering so much. This is why a devotee is always calm. He or she is always kind and patient. He or she is kind to everyone, including their enemy, because the devotee is not attached to the suffering of the body. The devotee is not attached to the suffering the body is facing, because he or she is convinced of the fact that he is not the body, but instead the soul.
Very good. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll have our... What? Oh, okay, sorry, go ahead. Homeworks are getting better and better.
So the homework was to look up examples of devotees who chose to suffer rather than to protest, and explain what is in the mind of the devotee. The verse Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto 14th chapter 8th verse states, "My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim." These are part of Brahma's prayers to Lord Krishna. The purport says, the word Susamikshamana indicates that a devotee earnestly awaits the mercy of the Supreme Lord, even while suffering the painful effects of previous sinful activities. Earnestly means with sincere and intense conviction. The goal of the devotees is to achieve the mercy of the Lord by serving him. They have no personal material desires. Hence, no matter how much suffering, the pure devotee eagerly performs the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and awaits his mercy. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that after a devotee fully surrenders unto him, their past karma doesn't actually affect them. However, the consciousness might still contain traces of the previous sinful mentality. The previous sinful mentality comes due to prior association with material nature. Even after a devotee fully surrenders unto Krishna, some of the previous sinful mentality might remain. This is what the last vestiges of the enjoying spirit mean. Vestige means remains or traces. So a bit of our tendency to enjoy without the Lord might remain, even though we might have completely surrendered to Krishna. Even though we give up all sinful activities, those thoughts might still be in our mind. Situated as Paramatma in everyone's hearts, Krishna knows that we still have the remains of our past sinful mentality. It is explained in the purport that the reason for the entire creation of the material world is to make sure that we rectify our tendency to enjoy without the Lord. As the marginal energies of the Lord, we have the choice to decide between Krishna and Maya. We have a tendency to fall under the spell of Maya. It is explained that the entire point of the material world is to get rid of this tendency. The material world is actually like a rehabilitation center. We are all here to correct our mistake of trying to enjoy without Krishna. We try to enjoy without Krishna, but the actual happiness isn't serving him. Because Krishna is in our hearts as Paramatma, he knows that we still have the remains of the previous sinful mentality, and thus he sends us punishments to remove these tendencies. The purport says that the particular punishment given for a sinful activity is specifically designed to curtail the mentality that produced the activity. So Krishna sends punishments as a purificatory process. What is this punishment? It is actually Krishna's mercy. Krishna's mercy is that he helps his pure devotees out of the material world. The devotee might be waiting for mercy, but this is Krishna's actual special mercy. As explained in the purport, just as one cannot approach the sun without becoming fire, one cannot approach the Supreme Pure Lord, Krishna, without undergoing a rigid purificatory process, which may appear like suffering, but which is in fact a curative treatment administered by the personal hand of the Lord. Thus the devotees of the Lord welcome material suffering in order to further cleanse any vestiges of material desire and to increase dependence on the Lord. Their mood is explained in the purport of Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, 13th to 14th verse by Srila Prabhupada. Coming again to the point of pure devotional service, the Lord is describing the transcendental qualifications of a pure devotee in these two verses. A pure devotee is never disturbed in any circumstances, nor is he envious of anyone. Nor does a devotee become his enemy's enemy. He thinks, this person is acting as my enemy due to my own past misdeeds, so it is better to suffer than to protest. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, 8th verse, it is stated, whenever a devotee is in distress or has fallen into difficulty, he thinks that it is the Lord's mercy upon him. He thinks, thanks to my past misdeeds, I should suffer far, far greater than I am suffering now. So it is by the mercy of the Supreme Lord that I am not getting all the punishment that I am due. I am getting just a little by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, a devotee is always calm, quiet, and patient despite many distressful conditions. The following are some examples of devotees and the Lord who chose to suffer rather than protest. Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur endured 22 marketplace beatings for chanting the holy names of the Lord and refusing to convert to Islam. He did not mind the pain, but he simply asked the Lord to forgive the Muslims for their offense of torturing him. Bhishma Dev. Bhishma Dev got shot onto a bed of arrows. He stayed that way for 10 days, waiting for the war to end in order to catch an auspicious muhurta to leave his body. There is an auspicious time for him to leave the body, called Uttarayana, and he had to wait 10 days. He waited and he got to glance upon Krishna's face before he could leave his body, choosing to leave in an auspicious manner. His mood while departing the body is explained in the Bhishma Stuti. Parikshit Maharaj. Maharaj was an unfortunate predicament because he was cursed. Parikshit Maharaj was in an unfortunate predicament because he was cursed to die in 7 days by a fallen Brahmana. It was very possible for Parikshit Maharaj to request Shamika Brahmana to undo the curse of his son, but Parikshit Maharaj was so realized that he accepted the suffering and instead took it as an opportunity to learn about the highest and most confidential knowledge to prepare for spiritual death. Lord Ram. Lord Ram had to leave Ayodhya and his soon-to-be throne to exile to the forest for 14 years on his father's orders due to Kaiki's wish. He did not ask any questions. He simply agreed to go and followed his father's instructions sincerely, even though it was such a sacrifice for him. Although he is the Lord himself, he wanted to be an example of duty, and thus he followed his father's instructions without fail. All these great devotees in the Lord are examples that we should persevere in our Krishna consciousness and not give up despite many impediments. On this matter, Srila Prabhupada gives direct instructions for serious and sincere devotees in the Nectar of Devotion. A devotee should not expect immediate relief from the reactions of his past misdeeds. No conditioned soul is free from such reactionary experiences because material existence means continued suffering or enjoying of past activities. If one has finished his material activities, then there is no more birth. This is only possible when one begins Krishna-conscious activities, because such activities do not produce reaction. Therefore, as soon as one becomes perfect in Krishna-conscious activities, he is not going to take birth again in this material world. A devotee who is not perfectly freed from resultant actions should therefore continue to act in Krishna consciousness seriously, even though there may be so many impediments. When such impediments arise, he should simply think of Krishna and expect his mercy. That is the only solace. If a devotee passes his days in that spirit, it is certain that he is going to be promoted to the abode of the Lord. By such activities, he earns his claim to enter into the kingdom of God.
See, notice he says, that is the only solace. Solace means the only thing that can give us some peace of mind if we don't protest and accept the suffering as the mercy of Krishna, because we become more dependent on Krishna in those difficult moments. That is our only solace. That's the only thing that can maintain us, is that faith in Krishna in those moments that are very dark and very difficult, and we think that everything is hopeless. But the hope is that we should accept those difficulties as the mercy of Krishna, so we become more dependent on Krishna. And that's the only solace. It's the only thing that can help us get through these difficult times. So we should not be afraid of those difficult times. We should accept it as the mercy of the Lord. Go ahead.
The exact word used in this verse is dayabhak. Dayabhak refers to a son's becoming the lawful inheritor of the property of the father. In a similar way, a pure devotee who is prepared to undergo all kinds of tribulations in executing Krishna-conscious duties becomes lawfully qualified to enter into the transcendental abode.
See, now most people, they think, well, if I become Krishna-conscious, I'll never have any problems in the world. No. As long as we're in the material world, there are going to be problems. But we have a way of dealing with the problems now because of Krishna consciousness. We learn to tolerate them. It's just like there's this one lady that periodically calls the temple and threatens us. And she always threatens on the phone. Sometimes it's Namarata, sometimes it's me. So how do you deal with a person like that? It's always threatening, we're going to go to the police, we're going to call the newspapers, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You just have to tolerate it. Because if you say something, get angry or something, that's exactly what they want. See? Or in other cases, sometimes situations become so difficult that you feel as if I can't function in Krishna consciousness anymore, I have to leave. But that's what people want. The people that are giving you trouble, that's exactly what they want you to leave. And if you don't leave, they lose, you win. Well, what does it mean? It's not really winning or losing. It means that the proof that you're Krishna consciousness, you don't let anything disturb your service to Krishna. You continue doing your service because that's the connection to Krishna. And no one can stop you as long as you're not breaking the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. In fact, when difficulties come, you should become more serious about following the rules and regulations and eliminate any discrepancies you may have. Become much more serious. Therefore, that's what protects you. The fact that you're adhering very seriously to Krishna consciousness, more so than before. So actually those difficult times are actually good for advancing Krishna consciousness. They're not bad, right? So it all depends on how you see things. If you see things as Prabhupada is explaining here, then you will always be under the protection of Krishna. If Krishna protects you, Raki Krishna Mari Ki, Mari Krishna Raki Ki. Krishna wants to kill you, no one can protect you. And if Krishna wants to protect you, no one can kill you. You have to be sure of that. Okay.
Therefore, we should be prepared to undergo all kinds of tribulations in Krishna consciousness, follow all rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, and constantly remember and pray for the mercy of Krishna in order to become qualified to enter the Lord's pastimes in the Supreme Abode.
Haribol, thank you. Very good. Hare Krishna. Okay, now we'll have thanks Srila Prabhupada. I'm performing Guru Puja. Who wants to lead the Guru Puja? Okay, Arush, Haribol.
Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada.
Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma.
Bandhamuhi Savadana Mate.
Bandhamuhi Savadana Mate.
Jahara Prasade Bhai E Baba Toriya Jai. Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoite.
Krishna Prabhu Oya Oite.
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Te Koriya Kya.
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Te Koriya Kya.
Arena Koriyo Mane Asha.
Arana Koriya Mane Asa.
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati.
Guru Charane Aise Uttama Gati.
Je Prasade Pure Sarva Asha.
He Prasade Pure Sarva Asa.
Chakshurdan Dila Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se.
Chakshurdan Dila Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se.
Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasha Jaite. Vede Gai Jahara Charito. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu. Lokenath Lokera Jivana. Ha ha Prabhu Koro Doya Deho More Pada Chaya. Ebe Jas Gushik Tribhuvana. Jayo Prabhupada Patita Pavana. Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashata Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Gaur Premanandi Haribo, Jaya Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Pararajagachasta Tarasatri Shishi Shimali's Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Shil Prabhupada Ki Jai, Antakoti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai, Namacharya Sil Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Sikhosi Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shri Bhakti Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prastaya, Bhutali Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinam. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru. So I forgot to give homework, and the homework is the following. Let's page 13 of the introduction. Now, it might be different, depends which edition of the Bhagavad Gita you have, but the paragraph starts with, what is this consciousness? This consciousness is I am. Then what am I? So that's what you have to, so it starts with, what is this consciousness? This consciousness is I am. Then what am I? In contaminated consciousness, I am means I am Lord of all I survey. I am the enjoyer. Okay, so that paragraph, read the whole paragraph. And the verse today was 2nd Canto, 9th chapter, verses 1 to 3. Read verses 1 to 3, actually 1 to 4, and read that paragraph, which begins in the introduction, which says, what is this consciousness? This consciousness is I am. And explain what is this consciousness of mine and I, or I and mine. And you can do a lot of research if you want, because there's a lot of information about it. But if you just read what I said, you can be able to do the homework rather easily. And give examples of people who are in the throes, T-H-R-O-E-S, look that word up, throes, T-H-R-O-E-S. What does that mean? Throes, T-H-R-O-E-S. The throes of the I and mine. What does it mean, throes?
Intense or violent pain or struggle, especially accompanying birth, death, or great change.
Yes, exactly right. So you see people say, throws away, you throw a baseball, that's what it means. No, it's pronounced like that, that's not the meaning. T-H-R-O-E-S, is that right? Yes. Yeah. So it means that you're in a very serious problem. And that is what this syndrome, that's another good word, the syndrome of I and mine, the false syndrome of I and mine. Okay? So then, the lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor and reverence. By his grace, I went across the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is perfection and fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor and Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful to us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter in your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada